Yeah, so welcome everybody to this session, and it's really about, I suppose, in some ways, it's trying to build, kind of look at the response to the kind of climate emergency, and particularly the way in which we can build climate and carbon literacy into business school curriculum, and what we kind of want to do in this short virtual session. So we've got a few things that we want to kind of do. So we've got overview of some of the really innovative stuff that's going on at Harvard, and Lynn's going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about stuff that we're doing at Birmingham, and kind of a global survey. Then we've got some kind of space for people to come along and talk about what they're actually doing to share things. Also, as a kind of as somebody who's, I like a plan B. That's all I'm going to say. So I've got a plan B of different things. So we're going to have a conversation about how we can maybe move some forward, and I've pulled together a few examples of things that people can actually use in this situation. I think we're happy to be interrupted, and sort of just a conversation to develop. So I'll pass over to Lynn now, and she can take over from what's happening at Harvard Business School.
Great, thank you. So Lynn Shank, and I am the director of the Business and Environment Initiative at Harvard Business School. So I am not faculty, but I essentially have a role where at the school I am kind of the center, or I'd like to think I'm the center of multiple stakeholders that are, doing something about climate change in the school. So I work very closely with about 30 faculty members who are affiliated with the Business and Environment Initiative. I work with alumni relations to do various outreach programs and convenings and conferences that potentially could reach our 80,000 plus alumni. I work with the Career and Professional Development Department and with admissions to ensure that we're attracting students who are interested in climate change. And I have a team of 3, and really what we do is support the research agenda, bring in new ideas, bring in connections with practitioners, use our platform to host convenings of various scales and working sessions, many focused on alumni, but also really just leaders in the field to try to identify the evolving list of problems in the climate space and business solutions. And so, I won't go through just reading all these bullet points, but really our role is to really amplify the work that is happening in all the various stakeholder groups across the business school, but as well as across Harvard. So have started working closely with the sustainability departments at Harvard on living lab examples and their own efforts to make their carbon reduction commitments by 2030, 2025, 2030, and 2040, and looking at ways that we can actually raise sums of money to invest directly in carbon reduction projects, and a number of various areas of data science collection and policy efforts together with the Kennedy School. So it's sort of a wide-reaching role. And just to set the context, I mean, there's various ways, I think, because the business school has over 1,800 MBAs in any year. There's 900 per class. It's very large compared to, and therefore there's a large alumni base. And we also have, an extensive executive education program, as some of you may know. But there's various platforms that we've developed to try to just get to know, to try to amplify the discussion using the volume of that platform. We put out, and it's on our website, an annual report every year that shows all of the teaching materials that are created by HBS faculty, whether they're cases, or articles or events that we host for which there may be links. We've started a podcast a few years ago, and we're working to ever improve that. But trying to get the discussion going through that medium. And then we put together an exhibit that the ambition was to have the exhibit about confronting climate change very much based on the drawdown sectors of areas for intervention. We put together this exhibit that was meant to travel across business schools, and then COVID hit and nothing was traveling anywhere and nobody would have been there to see it. So that's now an online exhibit that we might put back out at the HBS campus at the time of COP26, but the online version can be found on our website as well. So just, using various platforms to, to try to increase the discussion. HBS has a big, a deep role in creating a lot of the case study materials, but there's obviously so much more beyond that is, that are being created by other schools. And so I just wanted to highlight one area where I think it would be really interesting to bring together some of the best thinking from other schools. And so Ian, on the next slide, there's something I wanted to focus on just very briefly, which is called the Course Explorer platform. And that is through the Harvard Business Publishing part of the division, which is actually separate from the business school. They have a platform that outlines various courses, and there's, I think they have several hundred different courses under various topics, but we've been putting in an effort to really have a lot more climate focused courses, and it's accessible to faculty around the world, and it breaks out courses via a syllabus in modules that have, a few recommended cases and readings for those modules, some discussion questions, the purpose of the course, the full syllabus, and you can see here a screenshot of that, and I'm happy to, to share a live thing, but the link is at the bottom there. But it is something where this is by no means exclusive to Harvard Business School faculty to, to put their own syllabi on there or their own courses. This is really pulling from courses from around the world. So this is where, I would put out a call to this group and beyond to really, if there are courses that are really in depth, focusing on carbon reduction or focusing on any of these climate and business topics, that this could be a platform that could really then be used by, scholars, business school scholars around the world do seek their course materials from this platform. And so one of the bigger efforts that I'm making now is to just get climate more front and center. So that will start with having a climate change tab on this site, so you can search by that, which doesn't quite exist yet, but that's my next objective. But I think the more depth we can get and variety of coursework, that would make this, I think, a very usable platform for business schools around the world. So it takes work to get the syllabus and the course materials into this format, but I do think that it's been very successful, over the years in other topics for HBP to be able to, have this platform, and certainly something I think that helped move the needle as far as getting this integrated in curriculum. So I will leave it at that. Any questions, or we can go to Ian, who I think is doing very, very specific, meaningful work on the accounting side in the courses themselves. But
yeah. I mean, just we're a nice small group. Does anyone have any questions on that specific stuff that that Lynn's just outlined, or shall we kind of move on?
Yeah, I had just a sort of question on, at the moment, things are moving at a sort of fairly breathtaking pace in the sort of business, climate and finance space. And I'm just to get a sense of how we sort of keep the fact that, certainly in my sort of 20 plus years working in sustainability, there's never been quite a period like the last 12, 18 months of an agenda, a big substantive strategic agenda moving so quickly. And I'm just wondering how you're thinking, Lynn, about sort of making sure things stay in connected with the latest developments. Yeah,
I mean, one of the things that we added to I guess the curriculum process at HBS is having what's called short intensive program courses. So we offer a series of 4-day courses that allow to test new content that relates to, you know, any evolving subject matter. So actually last year we launched a climate finance SIP, they're called, the short immersive programs in our intensive program. And from there developed a full course where the material, you know, that would be offered this fall by Professor George Serafin, who's leading a lot of research in impact weighted accounts and in climate finance in general. And so it is, but throughout the year, we are trying to stay fresh by hosting, you know, a range of guests on the podcast, as well as preparing for other, you know, 4-day programs with new materials and hosting convenings where people are identifying, you know, the latest problems. So coming up in this fall, we're hosting, I think, a small group workshop on people focused on the capital stack, as it will, for the financing of tough tech climate ventures. And so what is the value chain from, you know, seed funding and catalytic capital all the way through to the larger scale project finance that take some of these projects out of the pilot stage. And so it's through workshops and convenings to which we invite students as well to listen and to do independent projects or externships throughout the school year. And then kind of ensure that these students have pathways into working for the companies that are trying to, you know, be at the forefront. So it is kind of this active interaction, but it's true that a case written, you know, I think that it's actually moving away from the case methodology, which I should probably never say, given how core that is to the HBS curriculum. But I do see, for example, the climate finance course on risks and opportunities that's being offered by Professor Serafin in the fall is much more of an interactive, data science-based, project-based course that is not going to be case-based. And so I do think that having, you know, setting up the courses where students are actually advising companies, or, you know, one of the things is how, you know, will be how do you actually advise, if you're an activist hedge fund, what do you pitch to Exxon, you know, for their transformation? And so, you know, getting actually people in the room from these companies, in that case, more likely from the hedge fund side, is, you know, I think where the trend that I see is going, but it has to be constantly updated by identifying guests for podcasts and short courses and convenings to kind of keep the information fresh. Yeah. The faculty are obviously focused on more long dated, deep research. So,
yeah, it seems like, Lynn, I sort of, my role at Ivy is kind of broadly similar to yours. It seems an area where the center playing that role in terms of connecting with practice, connecting with industry, connecting with alumni is an important value add to the more sort of traditional sort of research and teaching methodologies and approaches.
Yeah, I think so. And especially, I mean, I know that I just could hear a very, very small part of the discussion this morning in the breakouts, but, you know, tenure, things like that, the faculty are so much more restricted, I think, and obviously and are so overloaded with various obligations and teaching and research as it is, that that it would be impossible to expect the faculty alone. I mean, many of them do, and many sit on boards, and many are practitioners and advisors, obviously, on the side as well. But I do think having a dedicated, and we're a staff of 3, and I feel lucky to, you know, be a staff of 3, but it does play a critical role that you have to keep reminding people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
we can share notes.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm just conscious of time, and we'll have time. Hopefully, we'll have time at the end. So I would like to kind of just to move on to kind of the next one, which is I think a very different level, and this is something that we're doing at kind of Birmingham, and the idea was again it came from I think for a lot of frustration about what's actually going on, and in some ways, as in my kind of research and demonstrating a total almost lack of awareness of what kind of carbon and climate literacy was and how people would then start to do accounting. And part of it was if we're going to move to the net zero, what type of information are businesses and policymakers and institutions going to need to make the right sort of decision? And as I say, been working on this one here. And what we decided at Birmingham was to be the first accounting department to offer a program in which climate was embedded in every single module, not as a special thing, but really to try and kind of mainstream it. And the horrible diagram down the side was the first kind of like concept thing that we actually kind of was kind of drawing on a whiteboard with the different classes, the different programs, and whether we could connect climate change to every single one of these programs. And we were actually kind of able to do it in management accounting, in finance, financial reporting, even things like kind of critical kind of studies, as well as decision making and taxation and sort of economy and different kind of issues like that. And what we found was we then kind of ran this past professional accountancy bodies who are often seen as a barrier to this. And actually we found the opposite, that they were incredibly supportive of this initiative and actually said, yeah, we really like this because it's actually going to be part of accreditation. So what we were able to do was almost challenge and confront this idea that you kind of, this is something special, it's not ordinary. And what we've done is we've tried to make it ordinary. And for each one of these, we're having a lecture, reading material, some form of assessment, as well as some form of seminar on the topic. So it's not kind of a trivial, it's actually kind of embedded within it. And we're kind of launching it next year, so the next academic year, and we've very much kind of like got it. And what we also tried to do was when we initially came this, people said, well, we can't do this. This is really too difficult. We don't have this expertise. So we set up little support groups. We got an expert group who are area in this, and we're working as internal consultants and building this out. But what we found really useful, and again, I'm not going to go through this, this is just a horrible extract. What we did was we created a vertically integrated kind of climate program where we actually identified, using the kind of the classic stuff, what's the objectives, how does this progress through the different year, what are the kind of the developments in this, and what are the actual kind of like the outcomes that are actually required to do this. So it's like quite a nice, and I'm more than happy, I'll share the slides and share any documents with people on this, but actually using this vertically integrated program, which I think originated, I think, in University of Pennsylvania, which was then adopted in different universities about having almost like a separate curriculum or project that runs through. Some of my friends at St Andrews have an environmental ethics where it runs through different modules, but they've got extra pieces of assessment, and then they get a kind of like a certification for it running through, which goes alongside their degree. And we're actually exploring that right now with this to say, well, you can have your degree program, and if you do some extra work with carbon kind of accounting as a skill. And some of the professional accountancy bodies are interested in potentially running that as a thing there. So the kind of key thing is this idea of how do we integrate it across, linking it to the everyday kind of like techniques and aspects of each program, but also providing this kind of this framework which is there. And it's proved remarkably easy to get. So there's like a bit of a sell to begin with about climate emergency, but it's just this what are you doing in the climate emergency, mummy, daddy, kind of like other former partners? Are you teaching it? And in the realization that much of what we're already teaching was actually causing climate rather than problems, rather than resolving it. So this is just an example of how we've actually gone about doing it in this regard. And we're planning, and as a result of this, we're also planning to develop kind of teaching materials. And so actually kind of like Lynn, the framework that you're talking about would be a really useful kind of device to actually to bring these different kind of like elements, because we also can connect it together. I've got another one. I don't know if is there any kind of questions on this thing here, Darlene. I see you switched on, so I'm assuming from you switched on that you want to ask. So.
Yeah, I do.
Oh no, the pasta's gone exploding.
Pasta is ready to go. I am multitasking extraordinarily well today. So you said that the professional association was relatively supportive. So my question would be, because we're trying to kind of accomplish something similar here in Canada, and the professional association tends to have already in its mind topics that it wants either further research on or that it wants schools to explore more. And so did they already have this in mind, or did you sell them on it and this wasn't on their, or is just too vaguely on their horizon? Because we're finding that what our local ones are interested in are things like fintech and digital technologies, and they're just not yet there on climate. So I'm just curious to know if there was a difference to begin with what was on their radar for you guys.
It was a bit of a combination. So we obviously have quite a bit of connect, because this isn't coming from the space. So obviously do a lot of work on sustainability accounting for about 30 years. So we already had connections within it. So we were able to build this on the work which was already in the crevices of this so corporate social responsibility is already there. So things like integrated reporting is already there. Kind of like impact assessment, different valuation techniques. So what we did was we kind of like mapped out those requirements that was there, and we then used that to create a kind of case to show them that they already had it in their curriculum.
Okay.
We were also then able to work with the research, their research people, what they're actually doing, their publications. It was really helpful of the task force on climate disclosures, which had come out, which was getting quite a bit of traction. There's listing requirements on virtually every major stock exchange, which require companies to disclose their carbon emissions. There's things like all the Refinitiv, all the databases, all the Reuters, all the stuff, all the Bloombergs are all kind of doing this. It's all kind of part of the practice. So we needed to kind of pull together a case which said this is part of practice. This is part of what you already do. And then talk to them over time, and then say, and then what was the thing was giving them something like this, a document which had the progression, and presented it to them and say, tell us that this isn't a good idea. So it was taking the lead on it. So rather than being reactive, we used what was there and created a case, presented them with something, and then said, tell us why this isn't a good idea. And it's there. It's not just it's Chartered Institute Management Accountants. They keep changing their initials now, but they're now global. So there's a kind of global impact, and there's also the English Institute of Chartered Accounting, England and Wales, who are perhaps, I think, one of the most traditional-minded accounting institution, and they've bought it. They've actually gone net zero themselves. So we're able to do that kind of like that jiu-jitsu type flip. So you say you want to do it. Well, here's what it actually means, and here's the consequence, and how can you not be behind it? So that was there. Okay. But with a lot of demand from practice, You go talk to any financial institutions, and this is what they're worried. You go talk to people in the Big Four. They're trying to solve this. They're wanting people to come with these skills. It's a very different now from maybe 10 years ago, whereas now, certainly in Europe, there's a massive demand for this type of skills. So Matthew, you.
Yeah, no, this is fascinating. My question is, in terms of, it seems that not only is this program about sort of managing the sort of accounting and finance dimensions of corporate climate action, but it's also envisaging, as I understand it, a shift to the internal physical carbon accounting within an organization, moving into the accounting function. And this is from the model that traditionally that that sort of stuff is managed by the sustainability department. And I think that's really exciting, because if you look at net zero and you're going to pursue this properly, I can't see any other future where the core sort of management accounting is not managing this process.
Yeah, and actually it's funny because the original, when we did this, the management accountants were the biggest opposers to this. They said you can't do it. But actually, when you just get them and you just, I'm a management accountant, that's my kind of, it was my original job for about 10 years. When you actually go to them and say, this is about making decisions, here's about, they were the quickest, because they basically just went, okay, well, this is a limiting factor type thing. This is a bottleneck kind of problem. This is a case study. This is a performance measurement. This is a budget. This is a cost. This is investment appraisal. And from being the ones who said this has got nothing, the least to do with us, they're now got it the most integrated within their program, all the way through from first year, second year, and third year. And they're basically going, we can do stuff on dissertations and projects, and can't I just let's step one, let's let the others catch up with us. So, but it needed a vision. It needed a kind of a document to pull it together. I think that was the real, for me, the real lesson was actually having something like this, which isn't perfect, and you know, and we've co-wrote this in a couple of workshops, and it'll go through another iteration.
Yeah,
something that we're doing. So
yeah, no, I mean that's fantastic. I think just one sort of just in sort of the challenge of building sufficient knowledge of sort of physical systems to be able to sort of credibly manage the sort of physical accounting side. I'd be interested to see, you know, obviously you don't need, you know, a complete background, but you need probably some background that's obviously quite distinct from traditional sort of accounting education.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, we were lucky. I mean, this was a strength of the department, a research strength of the department anyway. So we had a good, about a third of the people had some experience of social and environmental or ESG accounting to begin with. There's only really two of us that had stuff on specifically on carbon, so that was it there. But what we want to do is build the material to share, and we're already sharing it through network. Lynn, you want to?
Yeah, just a question is, when you're integrating this in the curriculum, and you showed on the whiteboard sketch on the prior page, the outline of courses, I think that was that.
Yeah.
Are you making sure that it's sort of a module in every course, or is it in every day of discussion there's something, or is it, you know, how are you actually integrating it in the series of courses in the semester?
We're working. I mean, if we go back a little bit, so what we're doing is we're including it as a separate component within each one of these modules. So these are all the modules that they're doing. Okay. So it's becoming it emerges from the components within it. That's why we needed to have an element of progression across the different subjects. We thought about doing it as a separate module, but the concern was where would we put it, and it's about we wanted to make it kind of normal, if you like, a normal kind of like part of the experience. However, we're thinking about having separate pieces of assessment for each element that can potentially give the students an award. Like we've got these things that I don't know if other places have this. Like you can have it with a student citizenship award, you know, where it's not part of their formal degree. So what was the second part you would?
No, I think that was it. Just how it was integrating, you know, whether it was, you know, how deeply integrated it is in the, you know.
I mean, we're thinking that we're one of the things we were thinking about was actually having it coordinated in each semester, so that there's a splurge, if you like. So like in the different courses at the same time. So we're thinking of doing it for COP this time. To actually try and have all of these things happening, these lectures happening at COP, there's the first half, this side of it, which is the different These are different semesters. It's semester 1 and semester 2. There's no other logic to it. But in semester 1, we would try and get all of these things happening in the 4 first-year courses, the 4 second-year courses, and the kind of the 5 third-year courses at the same time to try and get a little bit of momentum going, and just this kind of a big heavy signaling for COP26. But that might be difficult to kind of coordinate. We're also going to deliver this. We have programs in Dubai and in Singapore, which will be delivered at the same time as well. So yeah. So we'll move on quickly to talk about another piece of work, which is through the Centre for Social Environment Accounting Research, and we've got some money to do kind of. The idea is to build climate literacy and global carbon accountability. And it was drawn from this quote from Mark Carney, which is, every professional financial decision takes climate into account to achieve net zero. So we took this as our kind of our challenge point. And then what we've done was we got some money from the Royal Society of Edinburgh to do a kind of a global survey, which looks at the kind of like baseline of the existing kind of education and any gaps across the world in relation to climate literacy and global and carbon accounting across the globe, to try and look for kind of like patterns. It's something that we've done with CSER before on social and environmental accounting, where we've actually done a survey. So we've got a kind of method. CSER has about 800 members, if you like, academics stretch across the kind of world. So that's our basic premise. But we're building this survey. We've all got work. We've had forums, work groups, and we want to try and build a community of practice to share that. So we're building a database to share kind of examples and various things like that. We're also looking at sort of building if you like, excuse me, sort of like a database and perhaps a textbook, kind of like co-produced across there. We're trying to do it in different languages, so we've got about 9 different languages, because we're aware that there's currently there's a language barrier in this space, you know, so that unless you speak English, it's very difficult to get material. So we've managed to get a team of people willing to translate all this into different languages, so that we've got it, so we're able to get a proper kind of global there. And it's something which is maybe just worth thinking about, that it doesn't, this approach doesn't actually have to be restricted to kind of to accounting, but this is maybe something that like kind of float to the network, is that but this kind of climate literacy and global carbon management or governance is something which is something that we could potentially explore as a community to build on that. Well, I'll stop there. Is there any questions or reflections on this one? If anyone wants to be involved in it, please just let me know, and we'll send you a link. We're just piloting the questionnaire just now. It should go live within the first tranche will go live within the next couple of weeks. So, we need to get this done by COP, by the way. So we've got the funding, so we need to get the report out there. Again, it's backed by CIMA, the European Accounting Association, British Accounting and Finance Association, CSER Network, and a range of kind of different institutions are backing this as well. So, Matthew, yeah.
Yeah, Ian, it always feels like the UK is often leading on many of these agendas. I was just wondering, with going back to the new program, do you have examples from industry of organisations that have adopted some of these approaches, these integration approaches into practice?
Yeah, I mean, we sort of like in my kind of like day job as a researcher, I do quite a lot of this. So we have a lot of this is informed by major companies. So we've got energy companies, water companies. We're lucky enough in Birmingham to have a headquartered for Europe Interface, who are the carpet tile people who've done amazing. They've actually got a carpet tile that eats carbon, absorbs carbon from the atmosphere, which is, you know, kind of linked in with sort of businesses doing circular economy, linking with retail companies and a range of different things. So nobody's got it all, but what we're finding is we're developing kind of nuggets of best practice from other places to pull it together. And we're looking to build that into the kind of the tech, into the teaching, and then the kind of the sort of like a textbook that we'll kind of wanting to share these case studies. Yeah. Okay, so we've got some time left now. We've got a decision. I've got a range of different slides here of different examples that we've kind of like come across, and maybe I'll just flip through them, and then we'll kind of open up, and if people have got other kind of examples. So just to throw some ideas at people. So this was from Sylvia and Marina from Birmingham Business School. They have this what I think is really interesting, this be a carbon consultant as a kind of piece of coursework. They've got sort of group work where people kind of like I wouldn't call it as a kind of carbon auditors. You're auditing each other's carbon over a period and putting together. There's some kind of programs, some training, carbon literacy training, and a really interesting game which you can actually kind of like develop. So they've got that there. Sylvia and Marina are both at the conference, so if you get a chance to talk to them, they're actually running a session just now. They can't actually make it. I had some Plan B slides just in case nobody turned up. The good thing is there's actually some research in this space, so we can actually kind of build on this. These are some examples of really good stuff. The Molten Hill one is part of the Uni Prime climate change organization. The professor there, she runs one of the climate change kind of like groups. There's a range of different kind of like articles to look at, and again, often finding these initial references and these sources are really important for breaking the kind of like the circle of not being able to teach it. There's some great games at MIT Sloan. I think Jason J presented some of these at the last workshop. They're free access. They're really kind of like, they're really useful kind of games. There's the negotiations. There's the clean startup. I use clean startup. It's a really nice one. It's just like a company saying you're starting off and you're selling clean tech energy companies, and it's a business game. It really gets the student engaged. You don't teach them about climate change, just say play the game and then reflect it. I kind of actually have used all of these and included them in assessments where you just add a reflective essay. I've got an example of how you would play the game and then what does this actually mean, so it becomes formally kind of part of there. So there's a few other games as well that are well worth doing. Very easy way to drop something into a program, and just kind of do it there. There's lots of carbon calculators. These work really well. You just kind of you give them and you kind of here's a carbon calculator, right, off you go and do something. Map this one, map your pathway to 2050. It's got like sliders you can play around, and you kind of like can work out how you can make your company net zero over the next kind of like 50 years. There's other ones which we could, if we'd had more time, is like which, if you're going to have a drink of coffee, tea, beer, or wine, which is the least carbon, which is the most carbon? And kind of sadly for some people, it's actually beer is the worst and tea is the best. So maybe we can actually do. But it's just something like this which really brings up this. You have a cup of coffee a day. That's the same as driving 795 miles in your car, or heating your home for 59 days. And that new kind of like way of thinking about decisions and these different ways, and have a glass of wine rather. I presented this at the Irish Accounting and Finance Institution, and they basically said, why did you present this? Why didn't you present this at the very beginning? Because we were able to persuade them to give us some wine rather than coffee, so that we could sort the climate challenge whilst we're actually having fun. And that's the Institute of Management Accountants. It wasn't even academics. But it's just stuff like that which can really start to change people's vision. This is one where it's slightly different. It's about costing your dinner. It's got different foodstuffs, carbon over the life cycle, linked to protein. And you can really, once you get this kind of raw data, you can really start to kind of to challenge things. So like use this in management accounting, like in a restaurant, to say you're designing it, stuff like that. Carbon cost your dinner. Repurposing case studies. I think Lynn mentioned it. One of the things that we've been able to do is take existing case studies and then just write what's the carbon. You know, it's kind of, it's cheap, it's easy. You take a case study you like and then just go, and what about the carbon carbon impact? And it transforms, particularly if you've done it in a previous year, you can then bring it into another one there. So there's some examples of ones that we've actually kind of did. This is a website of 100 case studies on moving to carbon zero. Carbon copy, click on it. It's a kind of a charity. They're building up to 1,000 case studies on carbon saving. It's a wonderful, rich resource that you can just take and ask to, you know, work your way through it. This is a website from Sustainable Consumption. We don't need to start from scratch. Sorry, Daniela. Sorry.
So Ian, these are amazing resources. So you are going to share this with us?
Yes, absolutely. And I think Lynn is also, we've got links embedded in these different sources. So and so I'll share the slides with people so that people
could you share that? Yeah, maybe, I don't know, is it possible maybe to add this into the chat now, or how could we do that? Or
I don't
want to send it to Maya?
Normally it works best by sending it to Maya.
Yes. Then send it to Maya. Send it to Maya and tell her to send it to me or to the people. Maybe we can then to the people who are wearing this in this room.
Yeah. Maya the magician. Yeah. So we've got that. We've got some great TED Talks. So I've kind of like curated different TED Talks together. If you just click on the link, you've got it there. But some really wonderful, if you're looking for material, it's really rich. It's a great format for education, you know, particularly kind of in different formats. And some of it is really funny. The world's most dangerous fart always tends to get some of the boys keen on things. And you've also got Greta Thunberg, and then you've got real kind of scholars in there as well, providing things. So it's a really kind of useful resource. There's lots of really good books. I found all these books very useful. I typically ask students to do book reviews. So give them a list of books, ask them to do a book review, and how that links to the marketing, links to accounting, links to finance. And it's a really good way to get on with different things. And then there's I just got this morning, that there's a UN Prime group, so people involved in Prime. There's a kind of a group of different business schools running this together, which again is really useful. We've kind of used some of it at Birmingham. We put some of our lecturers through the climate interactive program. So they basically, it's like about a three-day kind of like a course that you can do for Prime, which actually kind of is a really good resource. So these are just some ideas and trying to start this kind of sharing kind of process that I want to do. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to pass over to Lynn, who's raised her hand.
Yeah, I just have a question, Ian. How did you assemble? Did you assemble, you know, those pages where you're looking at the 100 cases going to 1,000, and the pages on books and podcasts, and something I'm thinking a lot about is really, you know, the ultimate data center, not scientific data, but the information center, the one hub concept. And I think, you know, things that are not just for a business community, but really, you know, the general public to understand. And so I'm wondering where you pulled those from, or is that your own?
Well, a lot of that is work that I've been doing collecting over time. So like, you know, so it's been I've been teaching accounting and sustainability since 1992. And so a lot of that stuff has been collected over time. But what we've done is we have kind of, I've also then, because I share, it has been through the Caesar network. We've collected a lot of these different things. Also, typically what I've done is I've maybe shared it with colleagues who want to do a course, and you just go, here's some stuff, but you got to give me stuff back, you know, so, so pay forward, pay back, and build over time. But it's starting to need to be formalized in a particular way. And I think one of the advantages of something like this community is that we can, if we can seed it and then get people to give it, but it needs something to organize. And I think that's why you kind of, the platform you've got is potentially really kind of like valuable. Or we do something, we look for resources to do something, you know, kind of like in a different way. But sharing, finding a way to share these things means that we can actually be much more effective. Because I know I've got colleagues that have spent the same amount of time that I have building up the material, and then suddenly you realize you've got most of the material is the same, and you're thinking, oh. But it's this kind of thing. Often you're doing it in a rush. So you've got a lecture in September. So you just go, I could have time to sit back and email all my friends and ask it. Or you just go, no, I've got a day to collect some stuff. I'm blah, 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 you know, and pulling things out that way. But that's when I think there's a need for collective intervention, or else there's an awful of it.
Yeah.
Darlene,
yeah, Lynn, I think it's a great question, because I was thinking similarly, particularly because it's so fast moving, the area, right? Like explosive pace. So taking the time to seek out resources, by the time you found the resources, something new is happening in this space. And if there was a way, so just by way of background, I got research funding to do something similar, like a knowledge hub or a data site on the carbon divestment movement. And what we found was that by the time the students on the project collected the resources, or the information on a particular movement in particular geography, that movement had done something else entirely 6 months later, and our data was already out of date, and our resources and our links were out of date. And so, like, the funding that we have is not sufficient to be able to keep pace here. But perhaps with collaborative resources and the infrastructure at HBS or whatever, there could be this kind of like urgency, and keeping pace is kind of a fundamental factor here. And it would be just really, it would really help so that we all don't reinvent the wheel continuously, as Ian is saying.
I often cheat, and I get students to do this. So like as part of the course, I'll say, the accounting sustainability course, say, you need to go, and first your job is to go and find some textbooks on sustainability, or you have to find a novel or films or documentaries on it. Then you need to come and present it to the group, and then we'll kind of pick the top 10 and kind of get that discussion. So that kind of like dialogic kind of engagement is a really useful way, and it's almost like using them as citizen scientists, to actually to kind of keep into update, and often with kind of cases. So I used to run a case study class. I'm not doing that much teaching just now, but I used to, as part of it, was to get the students to improve the case for next year. And they would then write it, and then write a solution. And that I found is a really good way to keep the cases fresh and update. So each year, as part of the assessment, the student has to update a case and bring it up to date in a particular way. But it does still need a way to share it. So yeah.
And maybe just one last question. I was thinking one idea is that I find a really very good idea to ask students to do the research for you. But regarding the stakeholder dialogues that you mentioned before, when you how often do you do that? Or because I also think that this is also something that is necessarily quickly outdated, isn't it? Or how do you approach that?
what we typically do is we have a series of, so as part of the network we have decentralized conferences. So we have South America, we have North America, we have kind of Italy is on its own, Spain and Portugal, Africa, different places. So we actually have, as part of these conferences, we normally have a kind of like a practitioner engagement forum where we actually do these things. So that allows us to, each year in the network, we have maybe about 6 or 7 conferences across the globe, which include kind of like practitioner type engagement.
Okay.
So that's a really kind of useful way to do it. But we're also, as part of this project, we're setting up we want to kind of set up a community of practice in this particular area, and that the forums would actually become a regular occurrence, possibly quarterly. But what we'd do is we'd have them spread around our different our bit of our network and pull things together. Also, also we're kind of quite we're quite opportunistic. So if we're in a forum, we'll just go, okay, hey, climate change, come on, people.
Yeah.
What are you actually doing? So I studied a lot of activism in my kind of accounting research. So it's sort of like who brings about change as activists. So I kind of look at how activists behave and how they use evidence and how they. So I've now co-opted into my research and engagement lots of activist tactics, because they're the focus things to get things done in that.
Yeah, I mean, for the sake of time, I am looking at the clock, and we have 2 minutes to finish this session. So I give the lead to you. How do you want to wrap up? Yeah, and please do the closing words.
Lynn, you want to go? You want to go penultimate?
I think this is really exciting. I mean, you, Ian, in particular, inspired a lot of ideas for me. I mean, given that this is recorded and hopefully other people will watch it, I really do look forward to hearing from others about, whether there are some possibilities to put more climate-focused courses up on a platform that's usable by all. That's just because we have this platform, I would like to let people know that. I'm thinking a lot about this sort of data conglomeration and just the access to consistently updated information, things that are usable by a wide audience, and really the best platform for that. And whether, at Harvard, maybe through the publishing company, again, we have that platform that can bring in, the work that you're all doing. That's what I'm inspired to be thinking more about. But and I really thank you, everyone who did participate in this discussion, and for those who are listening afterwards.
Yeah, so people who are here and people who are not here, who are kind of listening, if they have any kind of any examples or any case studies or any ideas, please kind of like communicate to us. And I think that what we'll try and do is we'll try and coordinate through maybe through kind of Maya or other people, try and get some kind of collective action sort of like going on, and try and get a conversation, a kind of a dialogue, which will allow us to move this forward, because we can't afford to wait. We can't afford to wait till it's perfect. We need to get stuff done to stop the shit happening. That's it there. I think that's the timing. So.